My name is Thea Bennett. I am 33 years old, a single mother, and 2 Thanksgiving dinners ago, my father called me the maid in front of 12 guests and my 8-year-old daughter. It was 7:42 p.m. I know because I checked my watch when I heard silverware pause mid-motion across the table. We were at my parents' renovated colonial in Westport, Connecticut. 12 people, copper serving dishes, a centerpiece that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My father was holding a wine glass, smiling the way people do when they think cruelty sounds better if you dress it up as charm. He raised that glass and said, "One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid." There was scattered laughter, the kind that sounds uncertain. Someone looked down at their plate. My sister Meredith froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My mother gave a brittle smile and said nothing. And my daughter Poppy, 8 years old, looked at me from across the table with confusion in her eyes. What my father didn't know was that the man he had spent all evening trying to impress already knew exactly who I was. Graham Holloway, real estate developer, investor, someone my father desperately wanted validation from. Graham had been quiet all night, polite, watching. By the end of that dinner, my father was too embarrassed to finish dessert. Before I tell you what happened at that table, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story genuinely resonates with you. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. I want to hear from you. Now, let me take you back to how I became the daughter my family could use, but never respect. I was 10, the first time I understood the hierarchy in my family. It was a Saturday morning. My elementary school was hosting an achievement breakfast for students who had won district writing awards. I had won for a short story about a girl who built a city out of things people threw away. I was proud. I wanted my parents there. Meredith had a private science tutor evaluation that same morning. Not a competition, not an award, an evaluation. My father chose that. When I asked why he couldn't come to both, he looked at me across the kitchen table with this reasonable expression. Like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. "Thea," he said, "you are good at little things. Meredith is building a real future. Be useful, not emotional about this." That phrase, be useful, not emotional. I had heard it 100 more times over the next 20 years. I kept the laminated certificate in my desk drawer for years. Sometimes I would take it out and run my thumb over the gold seal. It didn't make me feel proud anymore. It made me feel like I would misunderstood what mattered. By the time I was 17, the pattern was clear. Meredith got accepted to Johns Hopkins, pre-med track. My parents threw a catered backyard celebration. White rental chairs, a shrimp platter, neighbors, family friends. Everyone my father wanted to impress. I was the one walking around with a tray, refilling drinks, picking up napkins people had dropped in the grass. That afternoon, I asked my mother about touring a hospitality management and operations program at the community college extension. I thought, I don't know, maybe if I found something practical, something I was good at, it would count. My father overheard. He was standing near the grill with 3 of his golf friends. One of them was a real estate attorney, someone my father desperately wanted to do business with. He looked at me, then at them, then back at me with this smile. "Community college is plenty for someone like you, Thea," he said, loud enough. "Not everyone can be exceptional. Some people are just meant to help." The attorney laughed. My father laughed louder. I remember my throat going tight. My mother appeared beside me, took the tray from my hands, and said quietly, "Don't be dramatic, he is networking." I was 17 years old, holding nothing. Learning that the worse I felt, the more useful I was supposed to stay. I started to understand something that year. My father especially loved humiliating me in front of people he wanted to impress. It made him look, I don't know, in control. Generous for tolerating me. The real breaking point came when I was 25. I had gotten married young, too young. Daniel was charming and unreliable in equal measure. The marriage lasted 3 years. When it ended, I was 25 with a 2-year-old daughter, no degree, and a financial mess Daniel left behind. When he decided fatherhood was his words, not his vibe. I moved back to my parents' house temporarily, just until I could stabilize. My father's first comment wasn't to me. It was to Meredith, who would come home for dinner that first week. I was upstairs, putting Poppy down for a nap. I heard his voice carry up through the vent. Well, Meredith made something of herself. That is why she chose better. My mother said I could help around the house while figuring things out. What that actually meant was I coordinated meals, managed bills, scheduled appointments, handled all the invisible work that kept their lives running while they treated me like I don't know, a guest who had overstayed but was useful enough to keep around. Meredith was finishing her residency. Every dinner conversation was about her cases, her research, her future. When people asked about me, my mother would smile and say, "Thea's wonderful with organization. She keeps everything running smoothly." It sounded nice. It wasn't, my father would add. Some people build careers. Some people build systems to help other people's careers. Both necessary, he would say it like a compliment. Like he was being generous. One night I sat in the guest room after putting Poppy to bed and thought, what if I stopped trying to make them see me? What if I built something they couldn't ignore? I started taking freelance jobs. A widow in Darien needed help managing her estate calendar. Properties, staff, seasonal turnovers, vendor contracts. I organized everything, made it simple. She told her friend. Her friend told someone else. Within 6 months, I had 4 clients. Within a year, 9. By Poppy's first grade, I had moved out, rented a place in Norwalk. Had a business name. Bennett Estate Operations. A logo. A waiting list. The very thing my father looked down on. People kept paying me more and more to do it well. I didn't tell my family the full scope. Not because I was ashamed, because I already knew what would happen. They would minimize it, frame it as helping people organize their homes, instead of operational management. So I stayed quiet, let them think what they wanted. For a while, that was easier. By the time I turned 33, Bennett Estate Operations had 9 full-time staff members. We managed 14 recurring properties, luxury estates in Fairfield County, seasonal homes for executives who spent half the year traveling, private family offices that needed someone to coordinate housekeeping, maintenance, landscaping, vendor relationships, renovation oversight, and staff scheduling across multiple locations. Our annual gross revenue was around $2.3 million. I had a leased office space in Norwalk with glass walls and a conference table. I kept a color-coded operations, dashboard, service contracts, payroll schedules, vendor retainers. I employed people. I signed checks. I built systems that worked. I supported myself and Poppy completely. No child support from Daniel, who sent inconsistent payments when he remembered and excuses when he didn't. I didn't need him. I had built stability from scratch, but my family still thought I helped people with their homes. The worst part wasn't the dismissal. I had grown used to that. The worst part was watching my daughter start to absorb the hierarchy. Poppy was 8, old enough to notice, old enough to hear the way my father talked about Meredith's children, versus the way he talked about her. Meredith's 2 sons were future leaders. Poppy was sweet. At family dinners, Meredith's accomplishments took up most of the conversation. When someone asked about me, the answers were vague, brief, redirected. I had tolerated humiliation for years. I could survive it, but the cost changed when I realized it was starting to shape how my daughter saw work, worth, and women. That is what I was thinking about the week before Thanksgiving when my mother called to confirm we were coming to dinner. "Graham Holloway and his wife will be there," she said. "Your father's very excited. Graham's developing that new mixed-use property near the waterfront." I recognized the name immediately. One of Graham's property managers had been in discussions with my operations director, Naomi, about expanding our contract network. Graham Holloway wasn't just a local developer. He was someone who moved in circles where my work actually had a reputation. I almost said something. Then I stopped. What would be the point? My father wouldn't believe me, or worse, he would minimize it, turn it into something small, something he could still look down on. So I said I would be there. I would bring Poppy. I had sit through another dinner where I was invisible unless someone needed something. By the time I parked in my parents' driveway that Thursday afternoon, I already knew the night could go badly. I didn't know it would end my relationship with my father for good. The house smelled like roasted turkey and expensive candles. My parents' home in Westport was a renovated colonial with high ceilings, crown molding, and the kind of decorating that looked effortless but cost a fortune. The dining table was set with copper serving dishes, linen napkins folded into perfect triangles, and a centerpiece made of eucalyptus branches and white roses. 12 people. My parents, Meredith and her husband Andrew, their 2 sons, ages 11 and 9, Poppy Graham Holloway and his wife Anne, a neighbor couple, Cheryl and Tom, my father's golf friend, Stephen. The room was expensive but stiff, too much performance. Not enough warmth. My father spent the first hour performing. That is the only word for it. When Graham mentioned a recent property acquisition, my father jumped in with analysis of market timing, investment strategy, how he had always had an eye for undervalued assets. Graham was polite, professional, listening but not particularly impressed. My father tried harder. At one point, he told a story about turning down a business partnership 10 years ago because he could read the guy was bad news. He looked around the table. I trust my gut about people. That is how you get ahead. You assess character quickly. He said it looking at Graham, like he wanted credit for being perceptive. Graham nodded, took a sip of wine, said nothing. Meredith was introduced 3 separate times as one of the top pediatric neurologists in the state. I was barely introduced at all. When Anne asked politely what I did, my father answered for me before I could speak. Thea helps families stay organized, he said. Household operations, that sort of thing. He said it pleasantly, dismissively, like I managed grocery lists. Anne looked at me. That sounds useful. I smiled. It keeps me busy. My father had already moved on back to Graham, back to performing. At one point, my mother asked me to help bring out side dishes from the kitchen. I wasn't the host, I was a guest. But old patterns die hard. I went. When I came back, Graham was asking my father about his daughters. I caught the tail end of my father's answer. Meredith's brilliant, always has been. Thea's always been wonderful at helping around the house. It sounded innocent. It wasn't. I sat down. Poppy was coloring on a placemat next to me, half listening to the adults. I watched my father refill his wine glass. He had already had 2, maybe 3. He gets looser when he drinks. Louder, more performative. He started telling a story about how the Bennetts approach success. How he and my mother raised their daughters to have strong work ethics. How proud he was of what they had accomplished. He kept using Meredith as proof. I felt the familiar tightness in my throat, the heat that comes right before you realize you are about to be humiliated, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Dessert was being served: pumpkin pie, whipped cream. My father stood up with his wineglass like he was about to give a toast. I am proud of both my daughters, he said, smiling. In different ways, of course. The table went quiet, waiting. Then he smirked, looked around the table to make sure everyone was listening, and said, "One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid." There was a beat of silence, then scattered laughter. Uncertain, a few people looked uncomfortable. Someone shifted in their seat. Cheryl set down her fork. Anne Holloway's expression went carefully neutral. Poppy looked at me, her eyes wide. My mother gave a brittle laugh and said, "Richard." Honestly, Meredith froze. She didn't laugh, but she didn't say anything either. I felt the heat spread from my throat to my chest. My hands were shaking. I placed my napkin beside my plate, carefully, slowly, and looked at my father. My voice was calm when I said, "That told me everything I needed to know." The laughter stopped. My mother tried to smooth it over. "Thea, he is joking. You know how your father is." "No," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. She doesn't. Neither do I. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting would have been. Poppy tugged on my sleeve quietly. She leaned close and whispered, "Mom, is being a maid something people should feel bad about?" That question cut deeper than anything my father had said. I was about to stand up to take Poppy's hand and leave, to let this be the last Thanksgiving I ever spent, pretending my family saw me clearly. And then Graham Holloway spoke. Graham set down his coffee cup and looked across the table at me. "Thea Bennett?" he said. His tone was careful, measured. "Bennett Estate Operations." The room shifted. My father's smile faltered for half a second. He recovered quickly, but I saw it. The flicker of confusion. "Yes," I said simply. My father laughed. It sounded forced. "She helps people keep their homes running." He said it the way you had describe a cleaning service. Something small, something menial, something that reinforced the hierarchy he had just announced to the table. But Graham didn't react like someone hearing about domestic labor. He nodded, slowly. With recognition. "Bennett Estate Operations," he repeated, not as a question this time, as confirmation. Anne looked at him, then at me, and I saw understanding dawn on her face. My father didn't see it yet. He was still smiling, still confident, still certain he had framed the room correctly. I thought about something Naomi had said to me months earlier. We had been reviewing a contract proposal from a family office in Greenwich. She had leaned back in her chair and said, "One day, somebody's going to underestimate you in front of the wrong person at the time." I had shrugged it off. Now I heard it differently. What my father didn't understand was that there was a difference between domestic labor and operational authority, between cleaning someone's house and managing their entire property portfolio, between being useful and being indispensable. The people who actually knew my work had never confused the two. Graham was still watching me. I could see him putting pieces together. The name, the company, the reputation. My father had no idea what was about to happen. I could have left right then. Part of me wanted to take Poppy, walk out, let it go, like I always did. But then I looked at my daughter, 8 years old, sitting there quiet, absorbing the lesson that this was normal. And I thought, no, not this time. So I stayed. Graham spoke first. He set down his coffee cup and looked across the table at me. "Thea Bennett," he said carefully. "Bennett Estate Operations?" The room shifted. My father's smile faltered. Just for half a second. He recovered fast. "Yes," I said. Simple, clear. My father laughed. It sounded forced. "She helps people keep their homes running." He said it the way you had describe a cleaning service. Something small, useful but forgettable. Graham didn't react like someone hearing about domestic labor. He looked at my father, then back at me. Then he said something that changed everything. "We have been trying to contract with your team for 8 months. Silence. Complete silence. "My property manager reached out last spring," Graham continued. His tone was even professional. "Factual. Your operations director, Naomi, said you were at capacity. That you weren't taking on new clients until Q2 next year." My father's face went blank. "We had to go with another firm for a 3-property transition in Greenwich," Graham said. "They were fine. Competent. Professional. But they weren't you." He paused. "Let that sit. We are still waiting," he said. "Hoping your schedule opens up. Because when people in my network need someone who can handle complex operations without drama, your name comes up first." My father was staring at me like he had never seen me before. Anne leaned forward. "Wait, Bennett Estate Operations. I know that name." She looked at me with recognition. "You turned down the Riverside Arts Council project last fall. We wanted your team to coordinate the gala weekend logistics, housing for 75 donors, transportation, private dinners, vendor management, across 4 venues. I remembered. We had been overextended. I had referred them to a competitor. You recommended someone else instead," Anne said. "They did good work. But everyone kept saying we should have gotten Bennett first." My father was staring at me, like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. "Graham wasn't done. I have heard your name in 3 different rooms this year," he said. "Property managers, family office staff, people who don't give compliments easily. They all say the same thing. If you need someone who can handle complex operations without drama, you call Thea Bennett." the weight of that landed. My father tried to reclaim the frame. His voice had this edge now, this tightness. Well, yes, Thea has a business, he said. I mean, household management is good work, respectable. He was still trying to minimize it, still trying to keep me small. Graham shook his head slowly. Richard, she doesn't manage households. She runs operations. There is a difference. That line cut. Meredith finally spoke. Her voice was soft, defensive. Dad didn't mean it literally. I looked at her, my sister, the golden child, the one who had spent 36 years benefiting from a system that required me to be beneath her. It doesn't matter whether he meant it literally, I said. My voice was steady. He meant it hierarchically. The room went still. No one knew what to say. Cheryl looked horrified. Stephen studied his drink. Tom cleared his throat and said nothing. Graham leaned back in his chair. I have a meeting scheduled next month with a family office considering Thea's team for a larger contract cluster. 3 properties, seasonal transitions, full operational oversight. My father's expression cracked, just for a moment, long enough for me to see him realize what he had done. He had humiliated the only person at the table whose professional standing might actually impress the guest he desperately wanted approval from. I wasn't defending my worth anymore. I was watching his assumptions collapse in real time. My father tried to regain control. Thea, he said. His voice had that edge. You are being dramatic. Let's not make a scene. There it was. His favorite line. I didn't take the bait. Families shouldn't air private dynamics in front of guests, he said. He looked at Graham, trying to pull him into an alliance. You understand, daughters. They get emotional. Graham's expression didn't change. My father turned back to me. If I hurt your feelings, I apologize. But you are making this into something it is not. I felt something crack open in my chest. No, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. I am making this into exactly what it is. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching now. Really watching. I started Bennett Estate operations 7 years ago, I said. One client, a borrowed laptop. I built systems, hired people. Grew it through referrals. My hands were shaking. I kept them in my lap. I employ 9 people now. We manage 14 properties. Payroll, contracts, vendor networks, staffing transitions, renovation coordination, operations families, trust when everything else is chaos. My father's mouth opened, closed. I never told you the full scope, I said, because you had already decided. And nothing I said would have mattered. Meredith's voice cut in, soft, careful. I think maybe there has been a misunderstanding, she said. She looked at me with this practiced concern. Thea, if you had explained what you actually do, Dad wouldn't have assumed I turned to her. I have told you, I said, multiple times. You weren't interested. Well, but you never said it was this successful. Would it have mattered? I asked. Or would you have just found a different way to make it smaller? She looked away. I looked at Poppy. She was sitting very still, too still. Anne had moved closer, her hand on my daughter's shoulder. The issue isn't whether being a maid is shameful, I said. My voice was steadier now. The issue is you use people's work to rank their worth. And my daughter just heard that from her grandfather. Anne spoke quietly. Clearly, there is nothing shameful about honest work that mattered. Because it wasn't just about me being secretly successful. It was about the cruelty itself. Graham looked at my father. Not angry, something worse. Disappointed. You told me earlier you trust your gut about people, Graham said. That you can assess character quickly, but you didn't know what your own daughter built. My father's face went white. You didn't know she employs people, that she has turned down contracts, that she has a reputation, that the Arts Council wanted her team specifically, and she referred them to someone else, because she was at capacity. Each sentence landed. So either your gut isn't reliable, Graham said, or you chose not to look. My father stammered. We knew she had something you didn't ask, I said. My mother's voice came out tight. We knew it was going well, Thea. We just didn't realize the scale because you never cared enough to know, I said. The truth sat there. My father was trying to regroup. I could see it happening, that frantic recalculation. You are really going to humiliate me over a joke, he said. His voice was rising now. In front of Graham, in my own home? I am not humiliating you, I said. You did that yourself. I stood up. Poppy and I are leaving. I walked over to where she was sitting. Anne gave me a small nod. I helped Poppy into her coat. My father stood. Thea, you are being unreasonable. Let's talk about this like adults. I looked at him. We are done talking, I said. Poppy took my hand. You are really going to do this, my father said. Over nothing. I stopped at the door. No, I said. I am doing this because my daughter deserves one less table where women are taught to shrink. We walked out. The door closed behind us. I heard raised voices inside. My father's, my mother's, trying to calm him. Meredith saying something I couldn't make out. I didn't turn around. I took Poppy's hand and we got in the car. In the car, Poppy buckled her seatbelt and looked at me. Is Grandpa mad? She asked. I started the engine, pulled out of the driveway. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror. Grandpa said something unkind, I told her. And when people do that, we don't stay and pretend it is okay. She thought about that for a moment. Even if they are family. Especially if they are family. We drove home in silence. When we got there, I made her hot chocolate. Put on a movie, tucked her into bed an hour later, with her favorite stuffed rabbit. After she fell asleep, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand. I opened a text thread with my parents and Meredith, typed carefully. I am taking space. Do not contact Poppy directly. Any future relationship requires a real apology and acknowledgement of what was said, and why it was wrong. I didn't over-explain. I didn't rant. I just set the boundary. Then I put my phone on silent. Within 20 minutes, my father called twice. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. You embarrassed me in my own home. Not an apology. An accusation. My mother sent a text an hour later. Please don't blow this up. Your father has a hard time expressing pride. Meredith's message came last. He was wrong, but maybe there is a calmer way to handle this. I read them all. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for going quiet. I felt accurate. Word traveled. Not as scandal exactly, more like discomfort. The kind of story people share carefully over coffee. Richard Bennett humiliated his daughter at Thanksgiving. Called her a maid in front of 12 people. Turned out she runs one of the most respected estate operations companies in Fairfield County. The story spread because the guests talked. Cheryl told her book club. Tom mentioned it to someone at the country club. Stephen distanced himself quickly, didn't want to be associated with that kind of judgment error. But the real damage came from Graham. He didn't spread gossip. He just answered honestly when people asked about Thanksgiving. And people asked, within a week, my father's social standing started cracking. The following Tuesday, I got an email from Graham Holloway. Not pity business. He invited me to a meeting about the 3-property operational transition he had mentioned. Greenwich, Westport, Summer Estate in the Berkshires. Complex staffing, seasonal logistics. Exactly what my team handled best. When I told Naomi, she laughed. So your father's worst night became Q1 growth. I laughed too. First real laugh since Thanksgiving. But here is what I didn't know until later. Graham had also been considering a joint venture with my father. Some property development thing they had discussed months before. After Thanksgiving, Graham quietly pulled out. Not because of the insult exactly, because of what the insult revealed about my father's judgment. Graham told someone who told someone else that he couldn't partner with a man who didn't know what his own daughter had built. Couldn't trust someone who valued performance over substance, who claimed to read people but missed what was right in front of him. My father lost that deal. Lost it quietly. No announcement. Just a phone call that never came. A contract that went to someone else. He never told me directly, but I heard it through Naomi's network. Property managers talk. Family office staff talk. Word gets around. Heard my father had been furious. Blamed me for poisoning Graham against him, told people I had embarrassed him intentionally. Made him look bad. Still couldn't admit what he had done. Stephen, my father's golf friend who had been at the table, started declining invitations. Not dramatically. Just busy, cannot make it, other plans. The country club where my father spent his weekends. The dynamic shifted there too. Small things. People who used to seek him out for advice started asking other people. He was still a member. Still showed up. But the social currency had changed. My mother felt it at her charity boards. Women asking carefully about me, about my company, about what I actually did. She tried to control the narrative, told people there had been a misunderstanding at Thanksgiving. That family dynamics were complicated, but the truth was already out there. Meanwhile, things shifted for me. Anne Holloway invited me to speak on that Women in Leadership panel I mentioned, about operational work, invisible labor, how competence gets dismissed. The event was at a private club in Greenwich, the kind of place my father had always wanted access to but never quite managed. I spoke for 20 minutes, took questions. Afterward, 3 women approached me about potential contracts. One of them knew my mother socially. She mentioned it the next time they ran into each other. Your daughter was wonderful, so accomplished. My mother apparently smiled tightly and changed the subject. But the damage was done. In their social circle, it was now known. Thea wasn't the struggling daughter. She was the successful one who had been underestimated. My father hated that. Hated losing narrative control more than he regretted the insult. He tried to reset. Sent a text 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. Not an apology. Just, I think you overreacted. We should move past this. I didn't respond. My mother left voicemails. Your father has a hard time expressing pride. You know how he is. Still making excuses, Meredith asked to meet for coffee 3 weeks later. We met at a cafe in Darien. She ordered a latte. I got black coffee. She stirred her drink for a long time before speaking. You know how Dad is, she said. Like that explained everything. Yes, I said. That is exactly the problem. She looked uncomfortable, shifted in her seat. I am not like him. You were silent at that table, I said. When it mattered, I was caught off guard. You knew it was wrong. She set down her spoon, carefully. Okay, yes, it was wrong. But Thea, the way you handled it in front of everyone, you have to admit. That was a little what? Harsh, she said softly. Like she was being reasonable. You embarrassed him in his own home, in front of people he respects. There it was. Not he embarrassed you. Not he hurt you. Just concern for his feelings. He called me a maid in front of my daughter. I said, I know. And that was awful. But if you would maybe pulled him aside after dinner, instead of making it into this big thing at the table, so I should have protected him from the consequences of his own words. I am just saying there are ways to handle family conflict that don't involve public scenes. I looked at her. Really looked at her. My sister, the golden child, the one who had spent 36 years benefiting from a system that needed me beneath her. You are not upset that he said it, I said. You are upset that people heard it. Her face went pink. That is not fair, isn't it? I am trying to help you repair this relationship. No, I said. You are trying to get things back to normal. Back to where Dad's comfortable, and I am quiet, and you don't have to choose sides. She looked down at her latte. You knew what he was doing was wrong, I said. You just didn't want to risk your position by saying it. That hit. Her whole identity had been built on being the favored one. Challenging that meant questioning everything. We finished our coffee. Haven't spoken much since. Poppy processed things her own way. A week after Thanksgiving, she told her teacher her mom has a company. The teacher asked what kind. Poppy said, she makes big complicated things run smoothly. Later that night, she asked me what operations really means. I explained in kid language. It means I am the boss of making things work. When everything could fall apart, I am the person who makes sure it doesn't. She thought about that. Then smiled. That is cool, she said. She never asked about Grandpa again. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I secured the contract Cluster Graham had mentioned. Bennett Estate operations grew from 14 properties to 18. I hired 2 new staff members, moved to a brighter office with harbor views. Revenue projections were strong. Stability was real. Poppy loved visiting the new office. She'd sit at the conference table and draw while I worked. 6 months later, a birthday card arrived for Poppy. From my parents, mailed through my mother, $20 inside, generic message. No acknowledgement of what happened. I returned it unopened, not out of spite, because access without accountability was just the old pattern in softer packaging. I did grieve. Being right doesn't erase being hurt. There were nights I cried. Moments I missed the fantasy of family more than the reality, but I also healed. The panel Anne invited me to. It led to more speaking opportunities, more connections, more women who had built careers out of work people dismissed. I met operations directors who restructured hospitals, event planners who coordinated multi-million-dollar summits, women who made invisible systems visible. We weren't maids. We were the people who made everything else possible. And somewhere in there, I stopped needing my father to see that. It is early winter, 6:30 a.m. I am at my office before anyone else gets here. Coffee next to my laptop, dashboard glowing, client updates, payroll, a contract renewal waiting. There is a drawing taped near my monitor. Poppy made it last week. Colored pencils says. My mom makes everything work. I think about the old story sometimes. Meredith the impressive one. Thea, the useful one. That story only worked because I kept showing up to play my part. Once I stopped, it fell apart. Here is what I know now. Honest work is never shameful. Contempt. Some families don't see you clearly until you stop letting them look away. The boundaries you set, that is what your kids learn love looks like. If you are watching this, and you have ever been the lesser one in your family, the difficult one, the practical one, the one who helps instead of shines, listen. Being underestimated doesn't make you small. You don't owe silence to people who need you diminished to feel tall. Thank you for staying with me through this. If it resonated, like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. I want to know your story. Have you ever had to unlearn the role your family gave you? Drop a comment. Tell me. Here is what I want you to remember. The moment I stopped arguing for my worth and started protecting it, everything changed. It can for you too.